I just felt so lucky, so relieved, that I managed to get away from something that, at that time I didn't know exactly what happened, how many people had got killed, if anybody got killed. I just didn't know the enormity of the situation. I just was glad that I was out of it.
I think it was, in one way, that sounds a stupid thing to say, but I thought one of the main things that people were saying was it was a relief, because if it had been a weekday, a lot more people would have been killed, no two ways about it.
Every time 1st of June comes down round, it's the first thing that goes into your head.
Yeah.
What happened in 1974.
It was a normal Saturday afternoon, just normal analysis in the main laboratory.
Well, it was a beautiful day, and I'd finished nights on the Saturday morning.
It's that weekend, and I'd got up and I'd gone round to the mother-in-law's to watch a football match.
In those days I could on shift I could sleep well, so I woke up just a bit before, probably about 20 to 5, sort of catnapping, because it was a real hot day.
I'd been on mornings that morning, and we were round at my mother's, same as Raymond says, watching the football match.
I got up lunchtime, went into town to do a little bit of shopping. I was in the local market.
I was just moving about between one bench and the other to do whatever I was doing. And there was a loud rumbling noise, like a thunder, that rattled the window. So most of us, I looked towards the window, and because the noise came from the right-hand side, and I looked, and all I could see was some shimmering on top of one of these reactors. That's what the noise appeared to be, but that's all I could see. And straight after that, the alarm sounded, and people started moving away towards the exit. And I just looked around and I thought, well, this could be serious, and I started thinking, shall I just turn the Bunsen burners off? But I thought, no, this is silly, they're all moving out, I don't want to be the last one out. So we just follow one another to the exit. Luckily the exit was in the opposite side of where this rumbling came, and so I was just following the guy in front of me, and he was shifting, so I started legging it, as it were. No sooner did I got about 20-30 yards, I felt some heat on my left-hand shoulder here, and I looked and I saw this big cloud of cyclohexane, because I could smell it, igniting.
And then the blast happened at 5 to 5.
And it was as the football match finished when the plant exploded.
Yeah. And it was quite a huge ball of flame, and the last thing I remember was everything went black. So I must have been blown by the explosion. I didn't hear anything.
And I hear voices outside, people saying, it's got to be Nypro, it's got to be Nypro. And got dressed, went outside, and there's just this huge, big, Hiroshima type thing, really, just a massive mushroom. And
I remember somebody saying, it's a bomb, it's a bomb. And so I wanted to get out of the market, but my memories are everybody was pushing in the opposite direction to me. Anyway, I went onto the high street and noticed all the windows out, and I met my husband, who'd come onto the high street to speak to his mum, who lived in Flixborough at the time. And that's when I realised that, when I was told that Nypro had gone up.
And we realised what the explosion was, and we both went straight out to my car, and we drove down and got to the corner where Flixborough Wharf is.
So I must have been blown by the explosion. Didn't hear anything, maybe a few seconds, but I didn't know how long the time had gone, because I just woke up thinking that I was dead, and I thought, well, I can't be dead, because I'm thinking. A lot of blackness, a lot of dust, a lot of debris flying around. There was sheeting, there was a corrugated sheeting from whatever. I thought, this is not safe. So I picked my shoe up and started running again towards the opposite direction, which is towards the river.
And saw some injured people coming out. And as I turned around and started driving up towards the hospital, Raymond took all the details off the lads that we got in the car, and then rung the families to let them know they were okay.
my father-in-law and my young brother-in-law was at home at the time. They was watching the Schoolboy International, and of course my husband wanted to come into the village because he was worried about his family. So we jumped in the car, and as we got to the outskirts of the village, we was held up in a huge queue of traffic. It seemed like everybody wanted to come into Flixborough, and when we got to the junction to turn into Flixborough, the police was turning everybody away. And I told them, well, my husband actually told them that I was a nurse, and he waved us through because he thought that I might be able to do something. So we drove through the village down onto Stather Road, and the houses was completely demolished, and the people that lived in those houses, including my father-in-law and brother-in-law, had been taken to the hospital. I think we knew at that point they probably wasn't seriously hurt, so we drove to the hospital, and because I was a nurse, I left my husband to search for his family, and I presented myself to the A&E department to be told what to do and where to go. Unfortunately, most of the casualties that were coming in were cuts and bruises from the glass, because it seemed that the glass was the biggest problem for people, apart from, of course, the tragedy of those that lost their lives.
He was working in the sulphate plant, but luckily he was coming out of the plant because he had to go to another part of the works to have his snap, and as the explosion happened, it blew him about 30 or 40 foot across the plant yard, and he wasn't severely injured, it was just more cuts and bruises, and it affected his nerves more than anything with the noise and everything, and the fright.
But where he actually worked, the platform he worked on was completely demolished.
Yeah.
So if he hadn't
come out,
gone down to go somewhere for his snap, he would have gone with all the others.
Yeah.
Well, I was just glad that I was still walking and I wasn't badly injured, but I had no pain at that time, and I kept walking and walking. I saw a lot of cars on the main road, and I made my way towards the road, and most of the cars were going away from the plant, because obviously there was still fires and little explosion going on. Well, I wasn't interested. I survived the main one, and I just was quite glad to be where I was. But no sooner had I gone about 50 yards into the main road, there was one car came in the opposite direction. And it was a green car, and I recognised it was my father's car. And he stopped there, and he just, jumped in the back, and he turned the car around, and he hightailed to the hospital. And I thought, well, I better take my lab coat out and stick it out the window, because he's driving a bit erratic. So there's a reason why he's driving like that. So we made our way to the hospital.
We were sat in the village down by the side of the pub, and we heard the alarm go for Nypro, and whenever the alarm went, we always knew that the fire engines were going to come. So what we did was got on our bikes and started to race down there. Got around the corner about maybe a quarter of a mile away from the actual site, and it just went totally silent. Everything started leaning towards you, and the next thing we knew, it was like a big mushroom had gone up, just a massive explosion. We was laid at the side of the road, our bikes was across the other side, the whole village was trembling, and just like all the tiles were coming off the roof, all the windows were exploding. My sister grabbed me and my friend and ran us through some fields, and we actually came out further up in the village.
After the explosion, we were told to go. Don't pick up anything, just go. Apparently there were spheres that were full of ammonia that had moved on the bases, and if they'd collapsed or whatever, it would have been horrific for the village. Being ammonia gas, it would have killed everybody if anything had happened like that, but it didn't, thankfully. Everybody just walked out of the village. We were picked up by police cars, Black Mariahs and what have you, and taken to the police station.
Nobody bothered to ask how we felt. Okay, yeah, the family suffered together as a family. But outside of that, nobody bothered to ask how we was feeling. And of course, we would play around in the fields. We didn't even go into the fields or the woods because we was frightened of what we was going to find. With that explosion, okay, we was children, but you've got vivid imaginations. You know what could possibly be out there.
My job included cleaning up spillages, looking after gauges, and generally keeping the sulphate plant operation flowing. I had just finished taking some readings from some gauges and used the control room for monitoring the whole of the Area 3 that we were in, and generally it was the place that we stayed. It was late afternoon. I'd just been out taking readings and I'd come back in, and I and the rest of us heard a kind of a bang. Not a big bang, but enough to wake us up, make us all dash out of the control room to see what was happening. We just had time to get out of the control room and were looking, and what appeared to be a massive heat haze suddenly erupted in one mighty blast, and I was then blown off my feet with my colleagues who were looking. And we were thrown 40, 50 yards towards some acid tanks. Well, luckily the acid tanks didn't rupture because the concrete wall actually deflected the blast upwards and probably saved our lives.
It was a couple of days before we was allowed back into the village. So
About 4 weeks we was asked to go back down, and what we was doing was still clearing debris.
Because the fire's still burning, I don't think they were allowed to start dismantling the site and looking for bodies properly for at least 10 days. And then the Mines Rescue were working, well, not round the clock, working all daylight hours.
Because they were still looking for people that had perished in the incident, and we would clear so much of it, and then the Mines Rescue people would go in and shore it all up to get the bodies out, and then the police would go in to remove it.
But I think it took another 2 weeks before they, if my memory serves me right, another 2 weeks before they got the last body out. You know, because it was just tangled wreckage, really. It's carnage. Just imagine rubble with tangled pipework all wrapped up in it, and obviously they didn't know what was in every pipe they come along to. They just didn't know what was in it. So if they had to cut into anything, we would just make sure that it was safe for them to do that. But I thought those guys were absolutely amazing. I know they're just searching for bodies. There's no chance of anybody surviving it. But still, what they did, what they went through, I have a lot of respect for them. And also, the Salvation Army were there as well. We were getting tea and coffee, and a lot of people everybody rallied round, I guess. Yeah.
And I remember being really concerned about the cat. I'm sure it was all right from what my memory was, but and when we finally got to the home, it was glass. The glass had gone in on the windows. That was a few bits and pieces was sucked off the surfaces. But I remember mostly going up to the bedroom and seeing the bedroom, and the bed was covered in glass from the window, and the wardrobe was actually laid across the bed. And I remember thinking I was so fortunate not to have been home on that Saturday, because I know I would have been in bed sleeping after my night shift, and because I was in the early stages of my pregnancy, you just tend to look back and think, if things could have been so different.
I knew one of the John Render that was killed. I knew him from school. I can picture him as clearly as anything now. He was a really nice fellow,
Well, it just aged everybody. I mean, I think everybody sat down and said they'd aged 10 years, the shock. And I also remember one of the ladies, the row of houses that were blown up down near Nypro. We went in to see one of the ladies who, again, we'd grown up with, and I'll never forget, because she sat there among all the rubble and her furniture, and she said, well, it won't take much to clean it up. It's little things like that sticks in your mind, really. But it was a big, well, it affected everybody to some extent. The village life as it was never the same again, really.
Any question were asked, you just did the best you could, but I felt I was trying to be discredited for the question that they were asking me. What colour was the cloud, how big was it? Difficult to say in a situation, you had a glance at it. So if I'd have said the wrong thing, I could have said, well, you know, this is not a witness that we can rely on. So I felt a bit, I don't know, really.
Well, same as Flixborough and Burton, it virtually devastated them. But there's quite a few places in town that suffered damage. But it was quickly sorted out. But there's a lot of people got very nervy about being over on that part of town.
I can only speak about how it affected my parents-in-law, and it did affect them deeply. You know, losing their home was terrible for them at the time. I remember when eventually we could come back into the village, they couldn't go into their homes because of health and safety. They was worried that the houses might collapse on them.
See, people got nervous about any industry when something like that happens, because of British Oxygen at one corner with the steelworks, and people was thinking anything could, if Nypro could go up, which at the time was supposed to be the safest plant going. And the steelworks and British Oxygen was to go up, it could have been worse than Nypro going up.
Yeah.
To tell you the truth, after the incident, I virtually lost contact with most of them because of one thing or another. You know, we had jobs to look for, we didn't know what to do, and everybody went the sweet little way, so we never really had much contact with one another.
Parents-in-law were bitter, and I guess there was really that bitterness was there for most of their life afterwards, in the way that they were treated. They just, it was just, Nypro just seemed to think, well, it was unfortunate that you lived there.
In retrospect, it makes it ridiculous, but at that time, not 24-year-old, I hadn't got an idea what compensations are. That there was no sort of American culture like there is now, where there's a blame, there's a claim sort of thing. But at that time, a 24-year-old, £400 was, I think, was the price. We bought a car with it. Well, we put a deposit down for a Fiat, which was a third of the price, and I guess my motorcycle, a scooter, they got melted and disappeared into oblivion. It was about 120 or £200, something like that. So it's about a third of the price of a car in those days.
Time goes by, people tend to forget about it, apart from the people that worked there.
Yeah.
Because the people that worked there will never forget about it.
No.
We don't live here now, but we have to come back because it's home, and you know, for the people that lost people, that was it was terrible. But for us, I mean, we still remember all that, and how much it affected us. And you know, 1st of June comes and you still remember.
But obviously for families like the Renders and the Drurys and all the others, it goes on forever.
We didn't think it would happen again. We thought about moving, but it has affected people, definitely.
Brought the family and obviously everybody in the village together. I feel at that time to us it became a large community.
How I felt, I imagined D-Day probably would have been. It was that kind of thing. It instilled a community spirit, I think.
And everybody is still emotionally attached to this, which we shouldn't be really. We should be able to move on from it, but nobody has ever moved on from it.